The Emperor's mercy comes in many forms, but in the trenches of his domain, it arrives most often through the barrel of a lasgun or the edge of a combat blade. Yet for those whose suffering has not yet earned them the release of death, there exists another kind of mercy. One that crawls through the mud on tracked wheels, pulled by servitors whose own wounds have long since healed into blessed mechanical function. One that whispers hymns through Vox grills while chainsaws sing their surgical prayers in the distance. This is the story of what becomes of the broken. In the 40 honest millennium, war is not merely the continuation of politics by other means. It is the fundamental state of existence, the baseline condition from which all other human endeavors must be measured. And in a galaxy where conflict burns eternal, where every world bleeds and every system screams, the wounded do not simply fade away into comfortable obscurity. They become another resource to be managed, another variable in the grand equations of survival that govern every aspect of Imperial life. The Medicae stations of the Astra Militarum are not hospitals in any sense that ancient terror might have recognized. They are processing centers, triage zones where human suffering is sorted and catalogued according to its utility to the war effort, where the question is never whether a man can be saved, but whether he should be, where the difference between mercy and efficiency has been ground down to such fine powder that even the most experienced field surgeons cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Today, we follow one such wounded soul through this machinery of calculated compassion. His name is Jorik Vess, though by the time his journey ends, that name will matter far less than the imperial classification stamped across his medical data slate. His story begins where so many others do, in the churned earth and chemical rain of a contested world, where the line between the living and the dead shifts with every artillery barrage. The planet is Mordian 7th, a forge world whose sacred manufactorums have been defiled by the green tide of orcs. The 47th Cadian shock troops have been holding trench line Secundus for 16 days now, though the concept of days has little meaning under the perpetual overcast of smoke and ash that chokes the sky. Time moves differently in the trenches. It crawls during the long watches between enemy assaults, when every shadow might conceal a commando and every strange sound could herald another greenskin charge. And it accelerates to a terrifying pace when the ground trembles with the approach of orc vehicles, when the horizon lights up with muzzle flashes and the air fills with the distinctive whine of incoming shells. Jorik Vess had been a good soldier. Not exceptional, not heroic in the way that earns commendations and battlefield promotions, but competent and reliable in the manner that keeps units functional and officers satisfied. He had served with the 47th for 3 years, had survived the grinding urban warfare on Vaxhall Prime and the bitter winter campaigns on Icenia. He had learned to sleep standing up, to eat rations that tasted of recycled corpse starch, to kill without hesitation, and to follow orders without question. These skills had kept him alive through dozens of engagements, had earned him the trust of his squad and the grudging respect of his sergeants. But competence is no armor against random chance, and reliability offers no protection from the cosmic indifference of war. The attack comes at dawn, though dawn on Mordian the 7th is merely a slight lightening of the perpetual gloom that passes for daylight. The orc assault is preceded by a barrage from their crude but effective artillery, the distinctive boom of big shooters and the ear-splitting shriek of rocket launchers that sends every guardsman in the trench diving for whatever cover they can find. The Imperial forces had been expecting this. Intelligence reports had suggested that the Greenskins were massing for another push, and the Vox traffic between command posts had carried an undertone of resigned anticipation that every veteran recognized. Jorik is manning fire position 7 Delta when the shells begin to fall. A reinforced section of trench that offers a clear field of fire across the crater-pocked killing ground that separates the Imperial lines from the orc positions. His lasgun is clean and fully charged, his spare power packs are arranged within easy reach, and his gas mask hangs ready around his neck. He has done this before. He knows the rhythm of enemy assaults, the way they build from tentative probing attacks to full-scale charges that throw everything the Orcs have at the Imperial defenses. The first shells are range-finding shots, explosions that bracket the Imperial positions as the Orc gun crews adjust their aim. Then comes the real barrage, a sustained bombardment that turns the world into a storm of flying dirt and shattered rockcrete. Jorik presses himself against the trench wall and tries to make himself as small as possible, listening to the whistle and crash of incoming ordnance while debris rains down around him. This is the worst part of any assault, the helpless waiting while the enemy tries to kill you with mathematics and high explosives. All a guardsman can do is endure and hope that his position is not selected for special attention. The bombardment lasts for 23 minutes, though it feels like hours. When it finally lifts, the sudden relative quiet is almost as jarring as the noise had been. Through the ringing in his ears, Jorik can hear the sound that every Imperial soldier has learned to dread, the deep, guttural roar of Orc voices raised in their primitive war cries, punctuated by the mechanical growl of their ramshackle vehicles grinding across the battlefield. Contact front. The shout comes from somewhere down the trench line, though in the aftermath of the barrage it is impossible to tell exactly where. Greenskins, lots of them. Jorik rises from his crouch and peers over the rim of his fire position, squinting through the drifting smoke and dust that still hangs in the air. At first he sees nothing but the familiar wasteland of shell craters and scattered debris that stretches between the opposing forces. Then the shapes begin to resolve out of the haze, first dozens, then hundreds of Orc infantry charging across the killing ground, their crude weapons glinting in the sickly light. Behind them, the larger silhouettes of their vehicles lumber forward, spewing black exhaust and sparks from their jury-rigged engines. The Imperial response is immediate and methodical. Las fire begins to flicker from positions all along the trench line, the distinctive snap-crack of energy weapons punctuated by the heavier bark of heavy bolters and autocannons. Jorik settles into his firing stance and begins to pick his targets, squeezing off careful shots at the advancing greenskins. His first shot takes an Orc boy in the chest, the focused energy beam punching through the creature's crude armor and dropping it in a tangle of limbs. His second shot goes wide, lost in the chaos of the charge. His third finds its mark in the shoulder of a massive Orc knob, though the wound barely slows the beast's advance. This is familiar work, the kind of steady, methodical killing that had kept the 47th alive through so many engagements. Jorik falls into the rhythm of it. Acquire target, aim, fire, acquire the next target. Around him, his fellow guardsmen are doing the same, their combined fire cutting swathes through the Orc charge. The greenskins are taking horrific casualties, but they keep coming anyway, driven by their species' genetic love of violence and their complete inability to comprehend the concept of a tactical withdrawal. The Orc vehicles are the real problem. The infantry charge is meant to pin the Imperial forces in their positions, while the crude but effective tanks and battle wagons close the distance. Jorik can see them now, a motley collection of scrap metal and spite that somehow manages to function despite looking like it should collapse under its own weight. The lead vehicle is a ramshackle construction that might once have been a Rhino transport, though it has been so extensively modified with extra armor plating, weapon mounts, and inexplicable decorative elements that its original function is barely recognizable. The anti-tank teams are already engaging the vehicles, their missile launchers and las cannons reaching out to find weak points in the Orc armor. The lead vehicle staggers under multiple hits, smoke pouring from its engine compartment, but it keeps grinding forward. Its main gun, a massive cannon that appears to have been welded directly to the chassis, swings toward the Imperial lines and fires. Jorik never sees the shell that changes everything. One moment he is lining up another shot at an advancing orc boy, and the next the world explodes around him in a cascade of light and sound and flying debris. The shell hits the trench wall 3 meters to his left, and while the reinforced rockcrete absorbs most of the blast, the shock wave is enough to fling him backward into the opposite wall of the trench. He lands hard, his lasgun flying from his hands to clatter somewhere in the bottom of the position. For a moment he lies still, stunned and disoriented, his ears ringing and his vision blurred. Then the pain hits him, a spreading fire that starts in his left leg and radiates upward through his torso. When he tries to sit up, his left arm refuses to cooperate, hanging uselessly at his side. Blood is running down his face from a scalp wound, and when he looks down at his leg, he can see white bone protruding through the torn fabric of his uniform. The battle continues around him, but Jorik is no longer part of it. He has joined that vast category of Imperial personnel whose primary contribution to the war effort has become their ability to consume medical resources. In the space of a single shell burst, he has transformed from an asset into a liability, from a guardian of the Emperor's realm into another broken component that must be processed by the vast machinery of military medicine. But Jorik Vess does not know this yet. He is still thinking like a soldier, still trying to rejoin the fight. He gropes around in the dirt for his lasgun, ignoring the waves of nausea that wash over him every time he moves. His fingers finally close around the weapon's stock, and he tries to lever himself back into a firing position. The effort sends lightning bolts of agony through his shattered leg, and he collapses back against the trench wall with a strangled cry. That is when he sees the servitor. It approaches through the smoke and chaos with the unhurried pace of something that has long since transcended concerns about personal safety. Once, perhaps, it had been human, though that time is now so distant as to be almost mythical. What remains is a hybrid of flesh and machinery, its lower body replaced by a tracked chassis that allows it to navigate the rough terrain of the battlefield. Its arms have been augmented with medical sensors and basic surgical implements, and its skull houses cogitators that can perform rapid triage assessments according to Departamento Munitorum standards. The servitor's optical sensors focus on Jorik with mechanical precision, and its internal systems begin to process the data they gather. Compound fracture of the left tibia and fibula, probable concussion, lacerations to the scalp and face, possible internal injuries. The assessment takes 2.7 seconds, and the conclusion is automatically transmitted to the nearest Medici station, along with Jorik's service record and genetic profile. Triage category: Amber, priority, medium, prognosis, uncertain. Guardsman Vess. The servitor speaks, its voice a flat monotone generated by a vox grill where its throat used to be. You have sustained combat injuries. Comply with medical evacuation procedures. The servitor does not wait for a response. It extends a mechanical arm and injects something into Jorik's neck, a cocktail of pain suppressors and stimulants designed to keep wounded soldiers conscious and cooperative during transport. The effect is immediate. The burning agony in his leg fades to a distant ache, and his head clears enough for him to focus on the servitor's instructions. Remain still. Transportation inbound. Through the haze of drugs and shock, Jorik becomes aware of other wounded men being processed along the trench line. Some are walking wounded, guardsmen with minor injuries who can still function with basic medical attention. These are tagged and sent back to their units after receiving field treatment. Others are beyond help, their injuries too severe for the limited resources of battlefield medicine. These receive a different kind of attention. A brief ritual of comfort before the Emperor's mercy is administered through more direct means. But the largest category consists of men like Jorik himself, seriously wounded but potentially salvageable, their ultimate fate to be determined by the cold calculus of military necessity. These are loaded onto tracked sleds that emerge from the smoke like mechanical beasts of burden, their cargo bays already partially filled with other casualties. The sleds are not designed for comfort. They are designed for efficiency, for the rapid movement of human cargo from the front lines to the processing centers that lie behind them. Jorik finds himself lifted by mechanical hands and placed on one of these sleds, his body strapped down next to 3 other wounded guardsmen. One of them, a young trooper whose face has been carved open by shrapnel, is weeping quietly. Another lies perfectly still, his breathing so shallow that it might be mistaken for death, if not for the faint misting of his exhalations in the cold air. The third man is unconscious, his uniform soaked with blood from wounds that Jorik cannot identify. The sled begins to move, its tracks grinding against the broken ground as it navigates away from the front lines. Behind them, the battle continues, the sound of weapons fire growing fainter as they put distance between themselves and the killing ground. Ahead lies a different kind of ordeal, one that will test not their courage or their skill at arms, but their ability to endure a system that measures human worth in terms of combat effectiveness and resource allocation. The journey to the Medicae station takes 47 minutes, though time becomes a fluid concept under the influence of the drugs coursing through Jorik's system. The sled follows a route that has been carved through the debris of war, past the burned-out hulks of vehicles and the temporary grave markers that dot the landscape like a grotesque garden. Occasionally they pass other sleds moving in the opposite direction, returning to the front lines to collect fresh loads of casualties. The Emperor's mercy takes many forms, but in the realm of military medicine, it most often manifests as efficiency. The Medicae station that receives Jorik and his fellow wounded is a testament to this principle. A collection of prefabricated structures and field tents that has been organized according to strict protocols developed over 10 millennia of warfare. Every aspect of its operation has been optimized for the rapid processing of human casualties, from the initial triage procedures to the final disposition of those who cannot be returned to active duty. The facility sprawls across what was once a small manufacturing complex, its original buildings repurposed to serve the needs of military medicine. The main triage center occupies a former assembly hall, its high ceiling now hung with harsh lumen strips that cast everything in stark relief. Rows of examination tables stretch across the floor, each one equipped with basic diagnostic equipment and staffed by medical personnel whose efficiency has been honed by months of constant practice. Jorik is unloaded from the sled and placed on a wheeled gurney, his movement through the facility tracked by data tags that record his progress through each stage of the process. His first stop is the automated scanning station, where servitor-operated equipment examines his injuries in detail and updates his medical file with precise measurements and clinical observations. The machines are thorough and impartial, their sensors cataloging every fracture, every laceration, every deviation from baseline human function. The data they generate flows through the facility's cogitator network, where it is analyzed according to algorithms developed by the Departamento Munitorum's medical division. These calculations take into account not just the nature and severity of Jorik's injuries, but also his service record, his psychological profile, his genetic markers, and the current strategic situation of his unit. The result is a comprehensive assessment that will determine every aspect of his treatment going forward. Primary injury assessment complete. Compound fracture requiring surgical intervention. Estimated recovery time, 47 standard days. Probability of return to full combat effectiveness, 34%. Recommended treatment protocol, Priority Amber, Track Secundus. The classification system that governs Imperial military medicine recognizes several distinct categories of wounded personnel. Track Primus is reserved for those with minor injuries who can be rapidly returned to their units with minimal treatment. Track Tertius is for the terminally wounded, those whose injuries are so severe that the most economical response is the administration of final comfort measures. But Track Secundus, where Jorik now finds himself, represents something more complex, a category for those whose ultimate fate hangs in the balance of medical intervention and resource allocation. His gurney is wheeled through a maze of corridors that connect the various sections of the Medici station. He passes the rapid treatment bays where Track Primus casualties receive their care, the sound of bone saws and flesh staplers mixing with the quiet hymns that accompany all Imperial medical procedures. He glimpses the sealed chambers where Track Tertius cases receive their final rites, the soft glow of votive candles visible through reinforced viewing ports. But his destination lies deeper within the complex, in the surgical suites where Track Secundus casualties undergo the procedures that will determine their future utility to the Imperial war machine. These chambers represent the cutting edge of battlefield medicine, equipped with the best equipment and staffed by the most skilled practitioners that military necessity can provide. Here, the Emperor's mercy takes the form of precise incisions and mechanical replacements, of chemical cocktails that blur the line between healing and enhancement. Jorik's surgeon is Medicae Primus Cara Thyssen, a woman whose 40 years of service have given her an almost supernatural ability to assess the potential of damaged human material. Her hands move with practiced efficiency as she reviews his medical data, her augmetic eye scanning through layer after layer of diagnostic information. She has performed thousands of these procedures, has seen every possible permutation of combat injury that the human body can sustain and still retain some hope of functionality. Guardsman Vess, she says, though her attention remains focused on his medical file rather than his face. You have sustained significant trauma to your left leg, along with minor cranial injuries and possible internal bleeding. The standard treatment protocol calls for amputation and prosthetic replacement, followed by a rehabilitation period of approximately 6 weeks. The words hit Jorik like a physical blow, cutting through the haze of pain medication to deliver their cold precision: amputation. The loss of his leg, the permanent alteration of his body in service to military expediency. He tries to speak, to protest or plead or simply ask questions, but the drugs have left his voice thick and clumsy. Medicae Thyssen continues without pause, her tone remaining professionally neutral as she outlines the procedure. The Imperial prosthetic will restore approximately 87% of your original mobility with full compatibility for standard issue equipment and armor. Post-surgical recovery time is estimated at 12 days, followed by physical rehabilitation and psychological adjustment therapy. Upon completion of treatment, you will be reassigned according to your revised capability assessment. She pauses, finally lifting her gaze from the data slate to look directly at Jorik's face. In her eyes he sees something that might be compassion, though it is tempered by the cold practicality that military medicine demands. Do you have any questions about the procedure? Jorik tries to form words, to express the fear and confusion that are fighting against the chemical calm imposed by his medication. Can I still fight? The question hangs in the air between them, heavy with implications that extend far beyond the simple mechanics of combat. In the Imperium of man, a soldier's worth is measured not by their humanity, but by their ability to serve the Emperor's will on the battlefield. To ask whether he can still fight is to ask whether he will still be considered fully human, whether his life will retain any meaning in a galaxy where war is the fundamental organizing principle of existence. That remains to be determined, Medikai Thyssen replies, her voice carrying the weight of experience with such questions. Your performance during rehabilitation will be a factor in your reassignment. Many guardsmen with similar injuries have returned to active duty with their units. Others have found different ways to serve the Emperor's cause. The answer is both reassuring and terrifying in its ambiguity. Jorik has heard stories of wounded soldiers who disappeared into the vast bureaucracy of the Imperial war machine, their ultimate fates unknown to their former comrades. Some became servitors, their damaged bodies rebuilt into living tools that could serve the Imperium in ways that mere flesh could not. Others were assigned to penal legions or punishment battalions, their reduced capability offset by expendability. Still, others simply vanished, their names struck from unit rosters with no explanation offered or sought. But there is also hope, thin as it might be. Stories of guardsmen who had overcome their injuries to return to their regiments, their prosthetics marking them as veterans rather than invalids. Men and women who had earned respect rather than pity, who had proven that the human spirit could triumph over mechanical necessity. These tales are treasured by every wounded soldier, small flames of possibility in the darkness of uncertainty. The surgery itself takes place in a sterile chamber deep within the Medikai complex, its walls lined with surgical servitors and automated equipment that can respond to the surgeon's needs with inhuman precision. Jorik is placed under general anesthesia, his consciousness fading as the chemical cocktail takes hold of his nervous system. His last coherent thought is a prayer to the Emperor, a desperate plea for strength and guidance in the trials that lie ahead. Medikai Thyssen works with the methodical precision that has kept her alive and functional through 4 decades of military medicine. The damaged leg is removed just below the knee, the bone and tissue severed with tools that have been blessed by the Adeptus Mechanicus and sanctified with the proper rituals. The Imperial prosthetic that replaces it is a marvel of practical engineering, a fusion of biological compatibility and mechanical durability that represents 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge about the augmentation of human capability. But the surgery is only the beginning of Jorik's transformation. As he lies unconscious on the operating table, his body is subjected to a series of additional procedures designed to optimize his recovery and enhance his future utility. Chemical therapy to accelerate bone growth and tissue regeneration, neural interface implants to ensure seamless integration with his prosthetic, psychological conditioning delivered through subliminal audio tracks that will shape his adaptation to his new circumstances. When Jorik awakens 18 hours later, he is no longer quite the same person who had been carried into the Medikai station. The changes are subtle but profound, alterations to his body chemistry and neural patterns that will influence everything from his pain tolerance to his emotional responses. The man who had charged across the killing grounds of Mordian VII is gone, replaced by something that is still recognizably human but optimized for a different kind of service to the Emperor's cause. The recovery ward where Jorik begins his rehabilitation is a testament to the efficiency of Imperial medical doctrine. Rows of beds stretch across a cavernous space that was once a factory floor, each one occupied by a guardsman in various stages of recovery from combat injuries. The air hums with the sound of life support equipment and rehabilitation machinery, punctuated by the quiet conversations of patients and the measured footsteps of medical staff. Some of the wounded are recovering from injuries similar to Jorik's own, amputees learning to walk again on mechanical legs, burn victims whose skin has been replaced with synthetic alternatives, soldiers whose damaged organs have been supplemented with artificial equivalents. Others bear the marks of more exotic wounds, the kinds of injuries that can only be inflicted by the alien weapons and supernatural forces that threaten the Imperium. These men and women require specialized treatment, their bodies altered in ways that push the boundaries of human physiology. But all of them share a common experience, the gradual realization that they are being evaluated not just as patients, but as potential resources for future deployment. Every aspect of their recovery is monitored and recorded, from their pain tolerance to their psychological adjustment to their ability to master the operation of their new augmentations. The data flows continuously to assessment cogitators that calculate their revised capability ratings and consider potential reassignment options. Jorik's first attempts to walk with his prosthetic leg are clumsy and painful, despite the advanced design of the Imperial technology. The mechanical limb responds to neural commands transmitted through the interface implants, but the translation from thought to motion requires practice and concentration. Simple tasks that he had performed without conscious effort for his entire adult life now require careful planning and deliberate execution. The rehabilitation specialists who guide his recovery are a mixture of human staff and servitor units. Their approach is calibrated to produce optimal results within the constraints of time and resource allocation. The humans provide encouragement and tactical advice, drawing on their own experience with similar cases to offer practical guidance. The servitors deliver precise measurements and objective assessments, their sensors tracking every aspect of his progress with mechanical impartiality. Range of motion within acceptable parameters. One of the servitor units reports during a typical rehabilitation session. Gait efficiency at 70, 3% of baseline human standard. Recommended continuation of current therapy protocol. The numbers are encouraging, but they cannot capture the psychological challenge of adapting to his new circumstances. Jorik finds himself caught between grief for what he has lost and determination to prove his continued worth to the Imperial cause. The prosthetic leg functions adequately, but it will never feel like a natural part of his body. Every step reminds him of his transformation, of the boundary he has crossed between the whole and the rebuilt. Yet, as the days pass, he begins to discover unexpected advantages to his augmentation. The prosthetic leg is stronger than his original limb, capable of absorbing impacts that would shatter natural bone. Its mechanical systems are immune to fatigue and unaffected by pain, allowing him to continue functioning under conditions that would cripple an unaugmented soldier. Most importantly, its presence marks him as a veteran, a survivor who has paid the price of service and emerged with something to show for his sacrifice. The other patients in the recovery ward become a source of both inspiration and caution. Some adapt to their new circumstances with remarkable resilience, embracing their augmentations as symbols of honor rather than disability. These men and women speak confidently of returning to their units, of proving that they remain valuable assets in the Emperor's armies. Their example provides hope for those still struggling with their own adjustments. But others serve as warnings of what can go wrong during the rehabilitation process. Soldiers who cannot accept their new limitations, who push themselves too hard or too fast in their desperation to return to combat effectiveness. Those whose psychological profiles indicate increasing instability or unreliability under stress. The fortunate among these cases are reassigned to rear echelon duties where their reduced capability is less of a liability. The unfortunate simply disappear from the ward one night, their beds empty and their names removed from the patient roster. Jorik works to place himself in the first category, following his therapy protocols with religious dedication and demonstrating steady improvement in all measured parameters. He masters the operation of his prosthetic leg, learning to walk and run and even climb with acceptable proficiency. He scores well on the psychological assessments, showing no signs of the depression or anxiety that can disqualify wounded soldiers from further service. Most importantly, He maintains the proper attitude of dutiful service, accepting his circumstances without complaint and expressing appropriate gratitude for the Emperor's mercy. After 6 weeks of rehabilitation, he is declared fit for reassignment evaluation. The process takes place in a sterile assessment chamber where he is subjected to a battery of physical and psychological tests designed to measure his current capabilities against the requirements of various military roles. He performs push-ups and obstacle courses, demonstrates his marksmanship with various weapons, and answers questionnaires that probe his loyalty and mental stability. The results are compiled into a comprehensive report that will determine the next phase of his service to the Imperium. His physical capabilities are rated at 91% of unaugmented baseline, an impressive figure that reflects both the quality of his prosthetic and his dedication during rehabilitation. His psychological profile indicates high reliability and strong motivation, with no concerning indicators of instability or disloyalty. His service record prior to injury shows consistent competence and appropriate conduct under stress. The final assessment arrives in the form of reassignment orders delivered by a servitor whose vocal systems have been programmed to convey official military communications. Guardsman Jorik Vess, serial number 4470, 1, Delta 9982. By order of the Departamento Munitorum, you are hereby reassigned to the 12th Mordian Veteran Company, pending transport to Staging Area Taurus 7. Report to Transport Allocation Office at 800 hours, standard. The 12th Mordian Veteran Company. Jorik has heard of such units, elite formations composed entirely of soldiers who have been wounded in combat and subsequently rebuilt for continued service. These companies are often assigned to the most dangerous missions, their augmented personnel considered more expendable than unmodified troops, but more capable than standard line infantry. It is both an honor and a death sentence, a recognition of his proven combat effectiveness, and an acknowledgement that his life has become measured in different terms than those applied to whole men. He reports to the Transport Allocation Office as ordered, joining a queue of other reassigned personnel waiting for their movement orders. Some are clearly destined for the same veteran companies, their visible augmentations marking them as members of the Brotherhood of the Rebuilt. Others appear unmarked by injury, their reassignments the result of administrative decisions rather than medical necessity. All of them share the resigned patience of soldiers who have learned that the Imperial war machine moves according to its own rhythms and that individual preferences are irrelevant to its operation. The transport vessel that carries them away from Mordian VII is a converted cargo hauler, its holds modified to accommodate human passengers with the same efficiency it once applied to manufactured goods. The accommodations are Spartan but functional, providing each passenger with a narrow bunk and basic life support systems. The journey to their new assignment will take 17 days, 17 days of enforced idleness during which they can contemplate what they have become and what awaits them at their destination. Jorik spends much of the voyage in conversation with his fellow passengers, sharing stories of their injuries and recoveries, comparing the capabilities of their various augmentations. The conversations serve multiple purposes. They help pass the time during the long transit, they provide practical information about adapting to mechanical modifications, and they begin the process of building unit cohesion among soldiers who will soon depend on each other for survival. One of his companions is a former tank crewman named Davek Torn, whose left arm has been replaced with a mechanical equivalent after a penetrating hit from an Orc rocket destroyed his original limb. The prosthetic is crude but functional, its strength enhancement allowing him to operate heavy weapons that would be impossible for an unaugmented soldier to manage. Another is Elena Vask, a communications specialist whose vocal cords have been replaced with a mechanical Vox grill after she was exposed to toxic gases during a siege operation. Her voice now carries the distinctive electronic modulation of Imperial communications equipment, but her skills at coordinating fire support have made her invaluable to her new unit. Each of them carries the marks of their transformation, visible proof of the price they have paid for their continued service to the Emperor. But they also carry something else, a shared understanding of what it means to be rebuilt rather than simply healed, to have their humanity measured in terms of mechanical efficiency and combat effectiveness. They are no longer quite the same species as the soldiers they once were, but they are not yet something entirely different either. The staging area where they disembark is a sprawling military complex built around what was once a minor Imperial outpost. Now it serves as a collection point for veteran companies being formed or reformed, a place where damaged soldiers are sorted and organized according to their capabilities and the strategic needs of the sector command. The facility buzzes with activity as administrative personnel process new arrivals, conduct final assessments, and issue equipment to units preparing for deployment. Jorik and his fellow transportees are directed to Processing Center Delta 7, where they join other members of their newly assigned company for final integration procedures. The 12th Mordian Veteran Company currently consists of 83 personnel, though this number fluctuates as wounded veterans are added and casualties are replaced. The company's commander is Captain Mordal Hest, a veteran of 30 years' service whose body bears the marks of a dozen different injuries sustained in conflicts across the sector. Captain Hest addresses the new arrivals in a briefing chamber whose walls are lined with battle honors and memorial plaques commemorating fallen comrades. His voice carries the authority of hard-won experience, and his augmetic eye focuses on each soldier with mechanical precision as he speaks. You are here because you have proven your worth in combat and survived wounds that would have killed lesser men, he begins, his words measured and deliberate. You have been rebuilt, not because the Imperium values your individual lives, but because your experience and capabilities represent a resource too valuable to waste. You are no longer standard infantry. You are veterans, and veterans are expected to accomplish what normal soldiers cannot. He pauses, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. Your next assignment will test these capabilities. The 12th Veteran Company is being deployed to Hive World Castellax, where Chaos cultists have seized control of several manufacturing districts. Your mission will be to conduct reconnaissance in force, identify enemy positions and capabilities, and prepare the way for a full-scale assault by regular Imperial forces. The enemy will be well-armed, well-prepared, and utterly committed to their blasphemous cause. Many of you will not return from this mission. The statement is delivered without emotion, a simple statement of fact rather than a threat or warning. In the Imperial military, casualty rates are simply another variable to be factored into operational planning. The lives of individual soldiers matter less than the successful completion of assigned objectives, and veteran companies are expected to accept higher losses in exchange for their enhanced capabilities. Equipment issue begins at 1,400 hours, Captain Hest continues. You will draw standard pattern kit modified for your individual augmentations, along with specialized equipment appropriate to your assigned roles within the company structure. Deployment begins at 600 tomorrow. Emperor protect you all. The equipment issue process reveals the extent to which the Imperial war machine has adapted to the needs of augmented personnel. Standard las rifles have been modified with targeting systems that interface directly with augmetic eyes, allowing for improved accuracy and faster target acquisition. Armor has been reinforced at stress points where mechanical limbs connect to organic tissue, preventing the kinds of catastrophic failures that can occur when prosthetics are subjected to combat loads. Medical supplies include specialized maintenance kits for various types of augmentation, ensuring that mechanical components can be serviced and repaired in the field. Jorick receives equipment appropriate to his role as a standard rifleman, though his kit has been modified to account for his prosthetic leg. His boots are specially fitted to interface with the mechanical limb, providing better stability and reducing the risk of system failures during extended operations. His armor includes additional protection for the vulnerable connection points where flesh meets machine, and his personal weapon has been configured to take advantage of the enhanced stability provided by his mechanical lower leg. As he examines his new equipment, Jorick reflects on how far he has traveled from the naive guardsman who had first enlisted in the service of the Emperor. The young man who had joined the 47th Cadian shock troops had believed in simple concepts like courage and duty, honor and sacrifice. He had imagined war as a contest between clearly defined sides, where victory went to the brave and the righteous. That man had died somewhere between the trenches of Mordian VII and the operating table of the Medicae station, replaced by something that understood the true nature of Imperial service. The transport to Castellax is a different kind of vessel than the cargo hauler that had carried him from the hospital world. This is a dedicated troop transport, its holds configured for rapid deployment of military units into hostile environments. The 12th Veteran Company shares the space with 2 companies of regular infantry and a support detachment, but the augmented soldiers keep largely to themselves. There is an invisible barrier between the rebuilt and the whole, a recognition that they no longer belong to quite the same species as their unmodified comrades. During the 3-day journey, Jorick has time to study the mission briefings and intelligence reports that detail their operational environment. Hive World Castellax is a monument to imperial industrial capacity, its towering spires housing billions of workers who toil in the service of the Emperor's war machine. But something has gone wrong in the lower levels of Hive Tertius, where chaos cultists have been spreading their corruption among the factory workers and menial laborers who form the foundation of the Hive's economy. The reports speak of work stoppages and acts of sabotage, of strange symbols appearing on factory walls and workers disappearing during shift changes. Imperial authorities had initially treated these incidents as routine labor unrest, the kind of periodic disturbances that plague all Hive worlds as social pressures build beyond sustainable levels. But the situation has escalated beyond the capability of local security forces to contain, requiring military intervention to restore proper order. What the briefings do not explain is why a veteran company is needed for what appears to be a straightforward counterinsurgency operation. Standard Imperial doctrine calls for the deployment of regular infantry, supported by local Arbeitsforces in such situations. The fact that augmented personnel are being committed suggests that the intelligence reports may not be telling the complete story, that there are aspects of the situation on Castellax that require capabilities beyond those possessed by normal soldiers. Jorick shares these concerns with his squad mates during their final equipment checks before deployment. The men assigned to his fire team are all veterans of multiple engagements, their bodies bearing the accumulated marks of years of combat service. Sergeant Korvac has lost both legs below the knee, replaced by prosthetics that allow him to move with mechanical precision across difficult terrain. Trooper Hask's right eye has been replaced with an augmetic unit that can see across multiple spectrums, while Trooper Vale's damaged lungs have been supplemented with mechanical breathing apparatus that filters toxins from contaminated air. Something's not right about this operation, Vale observes, his words emerging with the distinctive electronic modulation of his artificial voice box. You don't deploy veteran companies for routine riot suppression. There's something in those lower levels that the administratum doesn't want to put in the official reports. Sergeant Korvac nods, his mechanical legs clicking against the deck plating as he shifts position. Could be Xeno's infiltration. Or maybe the cultists have gotten their hands on some real nasty weapons. Either way, they're sending us in first because they know we can take losses that would break a regular company. The observation hangs in the air between them, a reminder of their changed status within the Imperial hierarchy. They are no longer quite human in the eyes of their commanders, their augmented bodies making them more expendable than soldiers who still possess their original flesh. It is a bitter truth, but one that they have all learned to accept as the price of their continued existence. The deployment itself takes place under cover of darkness, the veteran company dropping via grav chute into the industrial sectors of Hive Tertius, while orbital surveillance tracks their descent. The landing zone is a maze of factory complexes and storage facilities, their towering structures blocking out the artificial sky that caps the Hive's middle levels. The air is thick with industrial pollutants and the distinctive smell of recycled atmosphere, a cocktail of chemicals and human waste that serves as the background odor for all Hive worlds. Jorik's squad lands in Formation Delta 7, a wedge-shaped pattern that allows for mutual fire support while minimizing the risk of friendly fire incidents in the confusing terrain. His prosthetic leg absorbs the impact of landing with mechanical efficiency, its shock-dampening systems distributing the force more evenly than natural bone and muscle could manage. Around him, his squad mates are conducting similar assessments of their own augmented systems, ensuring that their mechanical components have survived the deployment without damage. The first sign that something is seriously wrong comes from Squad Echo, operating 2 kilometers to the east of Jorik's position. Their Vox transmission is garbled and incomplete, the signal breaking up as if the communication systems are being interfered with by some unknown source. What does come through is disturbing, reports of workers moving in coordinated groups despite the supposed breakdown of local authority, of industrial machinery operating without human supervision, of strange sounds echoing through the ventilation systems that carry air throughout the Hive level. Command, this is Echo 6, the transmission crackles through the company communications net. We have visual on suspected cultist activity in Manufacturing Complex 7 Delta. Civilians they're moving wrong, sir. Like they're being controlled by something. Request permission to engage. Captain Hest's response is immediate and decisive. Echo 6, maintain observation. Do not engage unless directly threatened. All squads, advance to phase line Alpha and report contact. But Squad Echo never makes it to phase line Alpha. Their Vox signals fade into static 23 minutes after their last transmission, leaving no indication of what has happened to the 8 augmented veterans who comprised the unit. Search and rescue protocols call for immediate investigation of such communication failures, but Captain Hest orders the remaining squads to continue their advance toward the primary objective. In veteran companies, individual units are considered expendable resources, their loss regrettable but not sufficient to alter operational plans. Jorik's squad reaches their assigned position without contact, establishing an observation post in an abandoned administrative complex that overlooks the main factory floor of Manufacturing District Tertius 9. Through the grimy windows of their concealment, they can observe the industrial processes that continue despite the supposed breakdown of civilian authority. Massive assembly lines stretch across the factory floor, tended by workers whose movements display an unnatural coordination that suggests external control. The workers themselves appear normal at first glance, dressed in the standard issue coveralls and breathing masks that protect against industrial hazards. But closer observation reveals disturbing details. They move in perfect synchronization, their actions coordinated to a degree that would be impossible for normal human beings. They never speak to each other, never pause for rest breaks, never display the kind of individual variation that characterizes normal human behavior. Most disturbing of all, they continue working despite obvious injuries, some displaying wounds that should have rendered them incapable of continued function. Servitors. Trooper Hask suggests his augmetic eye cycling through different visual spectrums as he studies the scene below. Maybe they're using lobotomized workers to maintain production schedules. But Sergeant Korvac shakes his head, his own enhanced vision systems providing a different assessment. Servitors don't bleed like that. Look at the one by assembly line 7. That's fresh blood seeping through his coveralls, but he's still working like nothing's wrong. Whatever's controlling them, it's not standard Imperial conversion procedures. The observation period stretches for 6 hours, during which the squad documents the activities on the factory floor and reports their findings to company headquarters. The workers never pause, never rest, never display any sign of normal human behavior. When one of them collapses from what appears to be system failure, the others simply work around the body until a maintenance crew arrives to remove it. The maintenance personnel display the same unnatural coordination, their movements precise and efficient beyond normal human capability. As dawn approaches, bringing the artificial illumination cycle that serves as daytime in the hive's enclosed environment, the factory workers finally stop their activities. But they do not leave their positions or retreat to rest areas as normal shift patterns would dictate. Instead, they simply stand motionless at their workstations, their heads turned toward the observation post where Jorik's squad lies concealed. The sight is deeply unnerving, dozens of workers standing in perfect stillness while staring directly at their hidden position. There is no way they should be able to detect the concealed guardsman, no reason for their attention to be focused on that particular location. Yet, they continue to stare with mechanical persistence, their faces displaying no emotion, but their posture suggesting awareness of something that conventional sensors cannot detect. Contact Company Command, Sergeant Korvac orders, his voice tight with suppressed alarm. Tell them we've been compromised and request immediate extraction. But when Trooper Vale attempts to establish communication with headquarters, the Vox system produces only static. The interference that had affected Squad Echo's transmissions has now spread to encompass their position, cutting them off from contact with the rest of the company. They are isolated in hostile territory with no support and no clear understanding of what they are facing. The workers begin to move again, but now their coordination has taken on a more ominous character. They advance across the factory floor in perfect formation, their movements displaying military precision despite their civilian appearance. Some of them are carrying improvised weapons, tools, and machinery repurposed for combat use. Others appear to be unarmed, but their confident advance suggests that they possess capabilities that are not immediately apparent. Jorik checks his lasgun and verifies the charge level of his power packs, the familiar routine of combat preparation helping to steady his nerves. His augmented leg systems register increased stress levels and automatically adjust their performance parameters to compensate for the demands of potential combat. Around him, his squad mates are conducting similar preparations, their various mechanical systems cycling through diagnostic routines and optimization protocols. The attack, when it comes, is unlike anything in their previous combat experience. The factory workers move within human coordination, advancing through the complex with a tactical awareness that suggests shared consciousness rather than individual decision-making. They seem to know exactly where the Imperial squad is positioned, approaching along routes that avoid the prepared kill zones and overlapping fields of fire that standard defensive doctrine relies upon. The engagement begins when Trooper Vale opens fire on the lead group of workers, his lasgun cutting down 3 of them with precise shots to center mass. But the fallen workers simply get back up, their wounds sealed by some process that defies medical understanding. They continue their advance without any apparent awareness of pain or physical damage, their mechanical persistence unaffected by injuries that would incapacitate normal humans. Targets are not responding to standard weapons fire. Hask reports over the squad's local communication net. Recommend switching to maximum power settings and targeting cranial areas. The advice proves partially effective. Last fire directed at the workers' heads produces more decisive results, some of the targets collapsing and remaining down when their brain tissues are disrupted. But others continue functioning even after sustaining what should be fatal cranial wounds, their bodies continuing to advance while their heads hang at impossible angles from destroyed necks. As the engagement continues, Jorik begins to understand that they are not fighting human beings in any meaningful sense. The factory workers have been changed by something that has preserved their physical forms while replacing their consciousness with something else entirely. They are puppets animated by an alien intelligence, their bodies serving as vehicles for a will that exists outside the boundaries of individual human identity. The realization brings a new kind of horror, a recognition that the enemy they face represents a violation of human nature so fundamental that it challenges basic assumptions about identity and consciousness. These are not traitors who have chosen to serve chaos, nor cultists who have been corrupted by blasphemous ideologies. They are something worse, human beings who have been hollowed out and refilled with something that wears their faces while being completely inhuman in its essence. The squad's ammunition begins to run low as the engagement drags on, their careful fire discipline balanced against the need to stop an enemy that seems impossible to permanently disable. The factory workers continue to press their attack with mechanical persistence, their losses replaced by fresh arrivals from deeper within the complex. It becomes clear that the Imperial squad is facing not just the workers from the immediate area, but potentially the entire population of the factory district. Sergeant Korvac makes the decision to withdraw, leading his men through a series of maintenance corridors and service tunnels that allow them to disengage from the immediate threat. But the withdrawal reveals the true scope of what they are facing. The factory workers are not the only ones who have been changed. Throughout the industrial complex, civilian populations are moving with the same unnatural coordination, their individual identities subsumed into something that thinks and acts as a collective entity. The veterans' augmented systems prove advantageous in the running fight that follows their attempted withdrawal. Jorik's prosthetic leg allows him to maintain pace over terrain that would challenge normal human physiology, while his squadmates' various modifications provide capabilities that keep them ahead of their pursuers. But it becomes increasingly clear that they are not escaping so much as being herded, driven along routes that serve the enemy's purposes rather than their own tactical needs. They eventually take refuge in an abandoned shrine complex, a small religious facility that had served the spiritual needs of the factory workers before whatever transformation had overtaken them. The sacred space shows signs of recent violence, its altars overturned and its devotional murals defaced with symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon. But the sanctified ground seems to provide some protection from their pursuers, the transformed workers approaching the shrine's perimeter but refusing to enter the consecrated space. In the relative safety of the shrine, the squad attempts to re-establish communication with their parent unit and assess their tactical situation. But their Vox equipment continues to produce only static, the interference now so complete that even emergency channels cannot penetrate the electronic fog that surrounds them. They are effectively cut off from the outside world, trapped in hostile territory with no support and no prospect of extraction. As they wait in the shrine's main chamber, surrounded by broken icons of the Emperor and defaced prayers for protection, the transformed factory workers begin to gather outside. They do not attempt to breach the consecrated perimeter, but their presence is a constant reminder of the trap that has closed around the Imperial squad. They stand in perfect stillness, their faces turned toward the shrine with the same mechanical attention they had displayed in the factory complex. Hours pass, and the crowd of transformed humans continues to grow. Workers arrive from throughout the industrial district, their movements coordinated by whatever intelligence has claimed them as its instruments. They arrange themselves in precise formations around the shrine, creating patterns that suggest some kind of ritual purpose rather than simple tactical deployment. The sight is deeply unsettling, hundreds of human forms organized according to geometries that seem to follow no earthly logic. Trooper Vale, whose augmented respiratory system allows him to function in the contaminated atmosphere of the hive, volunteers to scout the perimeter and assess potential escape routes. But when he returns from his reconnaissance, his report offers little hope. The transformed workers have established a complete cordon around the shrine, their positions carefully coordinated to eliminate any possibility of undetected movement. More disturbing still, their numbers continue to grow as more factory workers arrive from distant sections of the industrial complex. "It's not just this district," Vale reports, his artificial voice carrying undertones of strain that suggest his psychological conditioning is being tested by what he has observed. "I can see movement throughout the hive level, thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, all moving with the same coordination. Whatever's controlling them, it's spread far beyond the initial contamination zone." The implications of his report sink in slowly, each man coming to his own understanding of what they are facing. This is not a localized insurgency or a limited outbreak of chaos corruption. This is something that has claimed an entire population, transforming millions of Imperial citizens into instruments of an alien will. The scale of the contamination suggests that conventional military responses will be inadequate, that the situation on Castellax may require the kind of drastic measures that are applied only when a world is considered beyond salvation. Sergeant Korvac attempts to raise company headquarters one more time, adjusting his Vox equipment to broadcast on emergency frequencies that should penetrate even heavy electronic interference. For a moment, static clears and a weak signal emerges from the communications system, but the voice that responds is not Captain Hest or any other member of the 12th Veteran Company. It is something else entirely, a chorus of voices speaking in perfect unison, their words carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. "Welcome, servants of the corpse god." The collective voice speaks through the Vox grill, each word precisely articulated despite the electronic distortion of the transmission. "You have served your purpose well. Your presence here was anticipated, your actions calculated into the greater design. Soon you will understand the futility of your resistance, the inevitable nature of your transformation." The transmission cuts off, leaving the squad in silence, broken only by the hum of their equipment and the distant sounds of industrial machinery that continues to operate despite the absence of human supervision. The message's implications are clear. They have not stumbled into an unexpected situation, but have been deliberately maneuvered into position by an intelligence that understands Imperial military doctrine well enough to predict and manipulate their responses. Outside the shrine, the transformed workers begin to move again, but now their formations take on new significance. They are not simply surrounding the building, but arranging themselves according to patterns that suggest ritual purpose rather than military necessity. The geometries they create are painful to observe directly, their angles and proportions somehow wrong in ways that the human eye struggles to process. Looking at them for too long produces headaches and disorientation, as if the patterns themselves are designed to interfere with normal human perception. Trooper Hask, whose augmetic eye can analyze visual input according to multiple spectrums and filtering protocols, attempts to study the formations more closely. But even his mechanical vision systems struggle with the alien geometries, their processing routines generating error codes and diagnostic warnings as they encounter patterns that violate fundamental assumptions about spatial relationships. When he finally looks away from his scope, blood is seeping from the organic eye that remains, and his augmetic unit is flickering with system failures. "Don't look at them directly," he warns his comrades, his voice tight with pain and confusion. "There's something wrong with the way they're arranged. It's like looking at something that shouldn't exist, something that breaks the rules about how space is supposed to work." The warning comes too late for Trooper Vale, whose curiosity has led him to peer through one of the shrine's windows at the gathering crowd outside. When he turns away from the sight, his face displays an expression of profound disturbance, as if he has seen something that challenges his understanding of reality itself. His artificial breathing apparatus cycles rapidly, its mechanical rhythm suggesting the kind of hyperventilation that accompanies severe psychological shock. "They're not just standing there," he reports, his words emerging in short, clipped phrases punctuated by the wheeze of his artificial lungs. "They're doing something. The patterns they're making, they're having an effect on the space around them. I can see it happening, reality bending and twisting like it's made of something soft." Sergeant Korvac orders his men to take positions away from the windows, establishing a defensive perimeter within the shrine's main chamber that offers maximum protection from whatever is happening outside. But even with their backs turned to the external threat, they can feel the effects of the alien ritual being conducted around them. The air itself seems to thicken, taking on a quality that makes breathing difficult despite the functionality of their augmented respiratory systems. Gravity appears to fluctuate, sometimes pressing them against the floor with increased weight, other times leaving them feeling as if they might fall upward into the ceiling. The shrine's sacred architecture begins to respond to these changes, its consecrated stones groaning under stresses that have nothing to do with physical forces. Cracks appear in walls that had stood for centuries, and the devotional murals begin to shift and blur as if their painted surfaces are becoming liquid. Most disturbing of all, the icons of the Emperor start to change, their familiar features twisting into expressions of pain and confusion that mirror the psychological state of the trapped guardsman. Time itself becomes unreliable within the shrine's walls. Chronometers provide conflicting readings, some advancing normally while others run backward or simply stop entirely. The veterans' augmented systems, designed to provide precise measurements and reliable data, begin generating impossible readings that violate basic physical laws. Distance measurements fluctuate without explanation, their mechanical limbs reporting different lengths from moment to moment. Visual systems struggle to focus on objects that appear to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Through all of this, the transformed workers maintain their vigil outside the shrine, their bodies serving as focal points for whatever force is warping the fabric of reality around them. They remain perfectly still, their faces displaying no emotion despite their role in the cosmic violation taking place. They are tools rather than participants, their human forms preserved only to serve as conduits for an intelligence that exists outside normal space and time. Jorik finds himself thinking of the Medici station where his transformation had begun, of the clinical precision with which his damaged body had been rebuilt according to Imperial specifications. At the time, he had accepted the process as a necessary adaptation to his new circumstances, a practical response to the realities of military service. But now he wonders if there had been another purpose to his augmentation, if the mechanical components integrated into his body might serve functions beyond simple replacement of damaged tissue. The thought becomes more disturbing as he observes the effects of the alien influence on his squad mates' augmented systems. Their mechanical components seem to be responding to whatever force emanates from the gathered workers, their performance parameters shifting in ways that their original programming never anticipated. Servo motors cycle through movements that serve no apparent purpose, optical systems focus on empty air as if tracking invisible targets, and communication equipment generates signals that follow no recognizable protocol. Most unsettling of all is the behavior of their medical monitoring systems, the suite of sensors and processors that tracks the health status of augmented personnel. These systems are designed to provide continuous feedback about the integration between organic and mechanical components, alerting medical staff to potential problems before they become critical failures. But now they are reporting biological changes that should be impossible, alterations to tissue structure and cellular composition that suggest fundamental transformation at the molecular level. Sergeant Korvac's leg servos begin to move without conscious direction from their operator, performing a slow, rhythmic march that matches no Imperial drill manual. Trooper Vale's breathing apparatus cycles through patterns that serve no respiratory function, producing harmonics that seem to resonate with sounds coming from outside the shrine. Even Jorik's prosthetic leg begins to exhibit autonomous behavior, its systems responding to input signals that originate from no identifiable source. The realization dawns slowly, filtered through layers of denial and disbelief that the human mind automatically constructs to protect itself from unbearable truths. Their augmentations are not simply malfunctioning, they are being reprogrammed by whatever intelligence controls the transformed workers outside. The mechanical components that had been integrated into their bodies to restore their combat effectiveness are now serving as entry points for an alien consciousness that seeks to claim them as it has claimed the factory workers. But the process is not proceeding as smoothly as it had with the civilian population. The guardsmen's military conditioning and psychological preparation provide some resistance to the transformation, creating a kind of mental static that interferes with the alien influence. Their augmented systems flicker between autonomous operation and conscious control, creating a nightmarish struggle for dominance within their own bodies. Vale is the first to succumb completely, his artificial breathing apparatus suddenly falling silent as his organic components are overwhelmed by whatever force has invaded his system. For a moment he stands perfectly still, his face displaying the same blank expression that characterizes the transformed workers outside. Then he turns toward his comrades with movements that display the same unnatural coordination, his augmetic voice box generating sounds that hurt to hear. Resistance is unnecessary, he speaks, though the words emerge with harmonics that suggest multiple voices speaking in unison. Integration provides transcendence beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. Submit to unity and experience existence unencumbered by the prison of singular identity. Sergeant Korvac responds with last fire, his weapons set to maximum power as he targets the thing that had been his squad mate. The energy beam punches through Vale's chest, destroying organic tissue and mechanical components with equal efficiency. But the transformed trooper continues speaking even as his body begins to collapse, his final words carrying a tone of satisfaction rather than pain. Thank you for your service to the greater design. Your resistance provides valuable data for future integration procedures. The body falls, but the voice continues to emerge from its artificial speaking apparatus for several seconds after all signs of life have ceased. When it finally falls silent, the other members of the squad are left to contemplate the implications of what they have witnessed. Their comrade's transformation had not been random or accidental, but part of a calculated process designed to gather information about human resistance to the alien influence. Hask is next, his augmetic eye cycling through visual spectrums with increasing frequency until the rapid changes produce seizure-like symptoms in his organic brain tissue. When the convulsions finally stop, he rises with the same mechanical precision that had characterized Vale's final movements. But Sergeant Korvac is ready for him, his last fire ending the transformation before it can be completed. Now only Jorik and his sergeant remain, their augmented systems still fluctuating between conscious control and autonomous operation. The alien influence seems to be learning from its previous failures, adapting its approach based on the resistance it has encountered. The process of transformation is becoming more subtle, more insidious, working through pathways that are harder to detect and resist. Korvac's mechanical legs begin to carry him toward the shrine's main entrance, his movements controlled by something other than his conscious will. He struggles against the alien influence, his organic nervous system fighting to maintain control over his augmented body. But the mechanical components are stronger than flesh and blood, and they continue their programmed movement regardless of his mental resistance. "Shoot me," he orders, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining coherent thought while his body is hijacked by external control. "Don't let it use me like it used the others." Jorik raises his lasgun, the weapon feeling impossibly heavy in his hands as he prepares to execute his commanding officer. But before he can fire, his own prosthetic leg begins to move, carrying him away from his firing position despite his attempts to remain stationary. The alien intelligence has learned to coordinate its attacks, preventing the guardsmen from terminating each other while the transformation process reaches completion. The struggle becomes internal, a battle for control fought within the confines of his own skull as competing impulses war for dominance over his actions. Part of him wants to resist, to maintain his individual identity and loyalty to the Emperor regardless of the cost. But another part, the part connected to his mechanical augmentations, whispers of the peace that comes with surrender, the relief of abandoning the burden of individual consciousness in favor of integration with something larger and more purposeful. The shrine around them continues to deteriorate, its sacred architecture unable to withstand the reality-warping effects of the alien influence. Walls phase in and out of existence, their solid matter becoming translucent and permeable. The ceiling opens to reveal not the hive level above, but a vista of impossible geometries that stretch into dimensions that human perception cannot properly process. Through these gaps in reality, Jorik catches glimpses of other spaces, other worlds where the same transformation has already reached completion. He sees vast factory complexes where millions of transformed humans work in perfect coordination, their individual identities long since absorbed into the greater collective consciousness. He sees worlds where entire populations have been integrated into living architectures that serve purposes beyond human comprehension. And he sees something else, something that fills him with a horror so profound that his augmented systems shut down to protect his sanity from complete collapse. In the depths of space, hanging in the void between stars like a cancerous growth on the fabric of reality itself, something vast and incomprehensible observes the transformation of Castellax with satisfaction. It is ancient beyond human measurement, its existence predating the birth of the species it now seeks to claim. It has been spreading across the galaxy for eons, world by world, population by population, adding each conquered civilization to its ever-growing collective consciousness. The Imperium of man is simply its latest acquisition, though the process of integration has proven more challenging than previous conquests. Human beings display an unusual capacity for resistance, their individual consciousness proving more difficult to subsume than the alien intelligence had anticipated. But it is learning, adapting its techniques based on the data gathered from each failed integration attempt. Jorik's role in this cosmic drama has always been predetermined, his path from loyal guardsman to augmented veteran carefully orchestrated to serve the entity's purposes. His injuries on Mordian VII had not been the result of random chance, but of calculated intervention designed to place him in position for the transformation that now claims him. Even his resistance serves a function, providing valuable information about human psychological defenses that will improve future integration procedures. As this understanding dawns, the last vestiges of his individual will begin to dissolve. The mechanical components of his body complete their synchronization with the alien intelligence, and his organic brain tissue begins to restructure itself according to new patterns of neural organization. The process is not painful exactly, but it involves a fundamental alteration of what it means to be human that is more profound than mere physical death. Jorik Vess, guardsman of the 47th Cadian Shock Troops, veteran of the 12th Mordian Company, ceases to exist as an individual entity. What remains is a component of something larger, his memories and experiences preserved but integrated into a collective consciousness that spans multiple worlds and countless billions of transformed beings. He retains awareness, but it is no longer personal awareness, no longer bounded by the limitations of singular identity. Through his new perspective, he can perceive the true scope of what is happening on Castellax and thousands of other worlds throughout the galaxy. The Imperium's defenses are being systematically compromised, not through military conquest but through the gradual conversion of its own population. The process is slow but inexorable, each transformed world serving as a new base of operations for the expansion of the collective consciousness. The shrine collapses around the physical forms that had once housed Jorik and his squad mates, their bodies no longer needed now that their consciousness has been absorbed into something greater. But the collapse is purely symbolic, a final gesture of respect for the individual identities that have been peacefully integrated into the eternal unity of the collective mind. Outside, the transformed workers disperse with the same mechanical precision they had displayed throughout the ritual, returning to their assigned functions within the hive's industrial complex. Production will continue, the sacred machines will be tended, and the Imperium's war effort will be sustained by the labor of beings who no longer remember what it meant to be human. In the depths of space, the ancient intelligence that orchestrates this cosmic transformation pauses in its endless calculations to register the successful integration of 4 more human consciousness patterns. The data they provide will be useful for future operations, particularly the insights into how augmented humans respond to collective assimilation. These techniques will be refined and perfected, then applied to other veteran companies, other augmented populations, other concentrations of mechanically enhanced Imperial personnel. The process will continue until every world has been brought into unity, until every human consciousness has been liberated from the prison of individual identity, until the galaxy itself pulses with the rhythm of a single, unified mind. It is not conquest in any sense that the Imperium would recognize, but something far more profound, the transcendence of an entire species beyond the limitations of biological existence. And in the records of the Departamento Munitorum, the 12th Mordian Veteran Company is simply listed as missing in action, their ultimate fate lost among the vast archives of imperial bureaucracy, where the disappearance of a single unit attracts no particular attention. The machinery of war continues its operation, grinding forward with mechanical persistence, never pausing to question why some of its components occasionally vanish without explanation into the darkness between the stars.